O ke au I ka huli vela ta honua. O ke au I ka huli lo le kalani. O ke au I ku ka ia ka kalai o malama lama I ta malama. O ke au makali I ta po ka vale vale ho o kumohonua ia. O te tumu talipo I lipo ai. O te tumu tapo I po ai. O kalipo lipo, o kalipo lipo. O kalipo o kala, o kalipo kapo. Po valeho I. Hanau tapo. Hanau tumulipo I kapo he kane. Hanau po ele I tapo. Hevahine. And so begins Kava Akahi, or the first time period. And these are the opening lines of Hemele Kumulipo, O Keau I Kahuli Vela Kahuna, the very first line. So let's take a good look at that first line. Um, how does it all begin? And you notice some of the words. Okeao, this word ao has some different meanings. Ao can mean like the universe, the time, the space, epoch of time. Yeah, the universe itself. Ao can actually be a self, myself, yeah, I, and the universe. Ao also means like besides time, like space, like outer space, all of space and time. Look at that meaning of the word. Time, space, time. We've heard that before. Even the great minds like Einstein talk about space time as one and the same. And so when we look at the opening lines of the Kumulipo, you can clearly see in with the use of Hawaiian language that this is exactly what's talking about. That space and time are described as one. Now, another meaning we have in Hawaiian, the word ao means to flow and move like a river, or like the current, especially in the ocean. Ao. So time and space in this current is moving. Kahuli, like to turn over, like to transform. Yeah, kahuli, like huli huli chicken. Vela, for heat. Vela kahonua, yeah, and the earthly matter. But what's important is to clearly see from the opening lines, yeah, what describes how everything begins, in fact, is a scientific, and let me use the word science very clearly here. It's a scientific explanation, yeah, that time, space, have yet to become, and they start to flow and they move. And it's in that turning and churning, the evolving and re-evolving, that creates heat, Vela. And heat, of course, we understand as being really the foundation of everything. Heat or energy, probably a better way to describe, appears before mass itself. Yeah, honua, the earth itself. Honua is also the word for a placenta. You see, so there are multiple meanings that they're talking about. Honua mean like earth, but honua is another word like for the placenta when the mother gives birth. So the opening lines, again, the point is to see when there's this idea that somehow Hawaiian culture is in some way contradictory or adverse to science. You see, we can see from the very foundational ideas, this is a total fabrication. In fact, at the deepest level of Hawaiian culture is based upon looking at everything in a scientific way. So science is very much at the core of what becomes Hawaiian culture. So anytime you hear these ideas, somehow the Hawaiians are anti-science. I mean, you can really say it's not Hawaiians that are anti-science. Hawaiian in itself, in our deepest cultural ideas, are based upon scientific principles. Yeah, that everything begins as energy before you have physical matter. So you think about that. Yeah, that before anything becomes, time and space begins to exist, and they turn and they churn, and then creates energy, and energy then begets the physical world. And the second line, o keau I kahuli lo le kalani, and again, o keau, time, space, and the flow, and it starts to churn and move. Lole kalani, and the word lole means to turn something inside out. Like if you took a sock or a t-shirt and you turned it inside out. Yeah, if I had a hat on my head and I flipped it inside out, that's lole. That the sky, the heavens will reverse themselves. Yeah, the inside becomes the outside now becomes the inside. Yeah, it's like again thinking of things being expressed in a poetic way as if it reverses itself, which means if I reverse myself from inside out, I must have already been outside in previously. So one of the ideas that comes from this is even the idea of what is kind of mentioned as being the beginning may not actually be the beginning. Yeah, it's like a reforming, it's a re-beginning. Yeah, that it reverses. Yes, if I turn this inside out, it had to have been outside in first. Yeah, which leaves the idea of the multiverse, or leaves the idea of things being recreated. Um, and then we start to have these important refrains that appear, talking about how light shines upon the earth and the Pleiades. And I'm not going too deep into, but so we talk about the celestial bodies, yeah, that are formed in the sky above, which did come on earth. And of course, following earth, what becomes the first life form? And this is what we call the Wa Akahi, the first time period. And there are 16 of them, yeah, in the first time period. And then talks about life itself being developed here on this planet, this earth. Hanau ka ukokoko, hanau kana ka ako puka hanau te tohi anuhi eliho o puho nu hanau kana he to e puka hanau ka pea kana keki puka hanau ka veli he veli kana keki puka hanau ka ina hanau kana ka halulu puka hanau ka hawa e ko wana ku kana keki puka hanau ka uholo ka unau na kana keki puka hanau ka pi oe ka pipi kana keki puka hanau ka papawa ka olepe kana keki puka hanau ka makaioli o ka opi kana keki puka hanau ka makaloa ka pupu awa kana keiki puka. Hana ka lehu ka pu lehu kana keiki puka. Hana ka ole kana keiki puka. Hana ka makaloa ka pupu awa kana keiki puka. Hana ka pipipi e ke kupe e kana keiki puka. Hana ka vi o ki kana keiki puka. So in the second part of the first, so we're in the first time period. The second part of that, we'll start to talk about the first life forms, the biological life forms we have here. And life begins where? Life starts in the ocean. This is a very critical understanding. In fact, science will say that is correct. Yeah, that Hawaiians had this sense that life begins out of the ocean, comes from the ocean. Hanauka ukuko born are the coral polyps, the live coral polyps that are seen supposedly the smallest thing you can see with a naked eye. And so if you've experienced ocean when you have the blooms, when the coral is basically blooming, and you have the finest little smallest you know, almost like a cloud you see in the ocean. That's the ukukoko. That begins the foundation of life, which of course creates coral, and coral becomes the foundation of what? The reef system, and the reef system becomes the foundation of all life forms. So in the first Wa, they start to mention all the various invertebrates. Yeah, these are the ocean life forms that you might find on the reef, the corals, the seaweeds, the shells, the crabs, and so forth that come first upon the ocean floor. So it also describes that hierarchically, the role of the reef really is the foundation of all life forms of the ocean. Yeah. So again, think about how that kind of teaches us to see as an ancestor, the reefs are something that provides life. Yeah. And of course, in today's world, as we look at the health of reefs, are denigrating, getting worse and worse, because of whether it's global warming or pollutants in the ocean. Obviously, there's a chain reaction that occurs. Yeah. So, and then from it is born puka, yeah, appears. And so you start to review all these life forms. And then it starts to mention the various life forms that appear. Yeah. Hanau e kaha, noho ikai, born is the kahas, residing in the ocean. Kia ia e kaha kaha, noho yuka, guarded by the e kaha kaha, the bird fern, up in the uplands. He po uhe kawawa, he po uhe, a night sliding into the sense of timelessness or the spatialness, wawa. Po he ka wawa, he nuku he vai ka aya kalao. He nuku he vai ka aya kalao. He nuku is like opening a nuku. Yeah, like think of like a gourd, a water gourd. He nuku, the opening of the water. He nuku he vibe, which is water, the food of plants. And so it starts to really describe water, vai, as really as a core element of all life. It's foundational in every life form as it appears. So it really shows how water itself the life-giving waters, Ola Ikavai, yeah, Kavaya Kane, the life-giving waters, really are the foundation of all life forms. Again, what is it teaching us? How we need to pay special attention to water. Water is a source of all life. And you have these repeats every time a new life form appears, like the Ekaik, O Kadevailoli, O Kavahini Wailola. Yeah. Hanauka, um, Hanauka, let me see, the second one goes, Waka Eka Haka, second one goes, Hanauka Aki Aki, Noho Ikai, Kia Ie Ka Ma Ni Ni Aki Aki, Noho Iuka. He po he kawawa, he nuku he vai ka ayakala, o ke akua ke komo a oi komo kanaka. So even when you have the Aki Aki grass, yeah, and the mani aki aki, which is the grasses of an aki aki being the seaweed. There's this relationship between these life forms. And again, you got to think, why? How do they live? Well, yeah, the combination of course, light and sunlight and fresh water. But important, kawai ololi, kawai olola. Maleness is being compared to water, the pressure. Think about how water moves in a very narrow space. Yeah, that forcefulness is kind of described as this maleness, masculinity. Yeah, you want to talk XXXY chromosome. Yeah, you're talking this male half. And women are being compared to broad waters as if it moves. But it's important to understand also, it's not saying at all that one is more powerful or stronger than the other. They create a balance at what becomes porno. There's maleness and females. So when you get together, yeah, life forms appear. And so, again, the poetry, not talking about literally water, but think about how water is being described in a poetic sense. You know, this male force and this female force. And when they get together, life begins. And these common refrains after every life form, o ke akua ke komo a oe komo kanaka. Akua enters. Akua who enters. Komo means to enter, to go inside of. So you got to think that enter into what? Into the realm, maybe into the time period. You know, this dimension. Yeah, this idea of something comes in. Akua, the divine one, the great so-called God enters. Aoi komokanaka, not humans. Humans don't enter. And so the two main interpretations is during this time period is a time period of Akua, a time period of the divine, the God. And humans have yet to come in. Aoi komokanaka is like saying Aole komokanaka. Humans have yet to enter. I was also taught one of the other meanings is that they're talking about all life forms. Actually, after each life form appears, that the divine of godliness is in each life form. Think about that. Everything that has life has a sense of godliness. Yeah, and um, but humans, yeah, humans have yet to appear. So I gotta just plug in real quickly. It's in my computer dying. Okay. So think about that. How does it create this world, this idea, an ideology that the world around us is not just as familial, but it's also divine. The sense of godliness is in each life form. That we as humans have nothing to do with that. This is divinity, yeah, which creates this separation of the divine and godliness, and the profane and the human. Yeah. But think about that in comparison, for example, to like Judeo-Christian ideas and Genesis, right? In Genesis, it says, like in that mythology of creation, that God shall have, sorry, that, God makes man in the image and they shall have dominion. The word dominion over everything, things that fly and crawls, but the word dominion is an interesting word. Yeah, dominion, like the word dominate, dominion, like to have a dominion, to own, like a kingdom, as if like a king, meaning everything around you is for your use. You are like the king. You are the ali'i, as they would use in the Hawaiian Genesis. That's a very different worldview. Yeah. Instead, in this worldview, yeah, everything around us is divine and godly, or is part of the sacredness of creation. And then when we get to the last part of the first section, here's something, hana ka hulu wai na no ka ke hulu hulu in ho ka po ka wa henu ke vai ka o ke akua ke komo a o e komo kanaka O ke kane hua vai akua ke na o kalina ka vai o ulua o ka huli o ka wo nua. O paia i ke au au ka manawa o he e au lolo at po o piha. O piha piha. O piha 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 e piha o te to o honua pa ai kalani. O lewa te au ya kumulipo ka po no. So in the last fourth section of the first time period, Wakahi, student Wakahi, they talk about water again, the elements of water. Oke kane huavai. It opens up with this line. Kane, like the male, is being compared to a huavai or huevai. These are the water gourds, um, where water will be kept in his large gourds, which is a very phallic symbol, very, very phallic symbol if you ever get a chance to look at those water gourds. So they're comparing the maleness to a water gourd, of course, which is like a penis. Okay, kane huavai. Yeah, which has to do with the sense of life and production of life. Akuakena, that is God. Now, again, you got to think poetry. What do they mean? Why is this phallic symbol talking about being God? Well, the idea that, as I was taught, is like that which brings life is godliness. The example was one kupunate is like the seed that you may have. If I had a seed right here and I put this seed on the table, right, or I put the seed anywhere, what happens to that seed? Nothing, right? But if I took some fresh water, maybe if I had a water gourd and I put water onto that seed, what happens now? Well, you want to say maybe it's a chemical reaction, what happened, but life becomes. See, that's the point. Water is the sense of seeing as is, you want to call the vehicle, the tool, or even the God itself is what brings life to that seed. So the seed which is latent means it hasn't yet becomes when water is added. So water does something, it brings life. Again, this is what's being described as being godly. This is what's being described as being divine. Yeah? The fact that something can become alive. The life itself is godliness. Whatever that energy is, that spark is, that happens, that is being described by these words. That is God. So again, to understand the poetry, yeah, it's not the literal. That's You're not talking about an actual water gourd. They're actually talking about the sexual practice, especially like a man. Yeah, what brings a woman to bring life out? Right. Yeah, it's a sexual relationship. Yeah, and so I would say, "Ola ikavaya kane," to have life to the sacred waters of Kane, and even that language, kavaya kane, has many different meanings. Kavaya kane can literally be water of life of the god Kane. It also can refer to the Milky Way you see in the sky in the heavens at around midnight. You see the male. That's also called Kovaya Kane. And yes, sperm itself for the male reproductive members is also called Kovaya Kane. And at the end of the first wa, the first chapter, are the words Po no. Everything is Po, meaning everything is dark, everything is night. But Po is also the realm of the sacredness, the realm of the ancients, the realm of the word Po literally means darkness. Yeah. But what it means is that which you cannot experience, that which you cannot see. So Po is also like that which is that we cannot really experience because of the limitations of our human senses, right? I can see, but we know as human beings, we can't see everything. Yeah, we can only see a sliver of white light. You have different kinds, electromagnetic, you get infrared, you have all these different levels of what can be seen. And some creatures can see and others can't. So we have limitations. That which is beyond the natural limitations of sight or our hearing, right? We hear a certain kind of wavelength that we can hear. If it's too low or too high, we know that, right? Dogs, you have dog whistles you can blow, right? Where a dog can hear because it's out of the range. Now, that is all, in a sense, that's also pole. So, from the very foundation, it's very clear that, for Hawaiians, we always understand that there are things, experiences, powers that are beyond our natural abilities. You see, this is part of a natural world that there are things that we cannot hear that make a sound, or things that we cannot see, perhaps, that can be seen by others. And that's all part of Po. We talk about where our ancestors When we pass on, we return. May kapo, ho ikapo. When we pass on, we return to Po. Our ancestors reside in Po. But it's not like heaven that's up there in the holy sense, in a white man sense, in a Christian sense, but in a sense of everything around us may be in Po. Now the flip of the word again, this is poetry. It's not just it is indeed tis night, tis darkness. But when you say the word po no, we also the word pono means everything is what? Pono. Everything is righteous, everything is in harmony, everything is balanced. This is how it's supposed to be. Yeah, so it's a very important like idea that this is like the natural order of things. This is what's going on. Pono. Um, Let me just kind of skip through some of these from my other classes and just to kind of run quickly through the other major parts of the first eight. Yeah. The second time period. So we close out the first time period. Now we have Wa Elu, the second time period. And still in the ocean, Hanao Kamano, Hanao Kamano Kaila Hol. And it starts to recite all these different creatures that appear. And again, I think makes sense, right? Now that you have the reef, the shellfish, you have the seaweed, well, what's going to come next? Now you have the fish, right? You really realize, so it's pretty smart. You cannot have the fish first and then the reefs, right? You got to make sure you have reefs and seaweed for the fish to eat. So there's a natural kind of way in which they thoughtfully, mindfully built in this story, in this narrative, what depends on what. What there is a natural hierarchy that is set. You see, that's the important part. So in the second time period, we have all the swimmers that appear. And you notice even the sounds, yeah, Mano and Moano sound very similar. That's why they're paired up. So it's not scientifically, it's kind of like now we have the swimming creatures in the second period. And the very last words, Pono, again, everything's Pono. Wa ekolu, we have the flyers that appear. Hanau ka ala hemakua pukana kehi apapane, lele, and they take flight. So now you have these flying creatures, ancient creatures that appear. And again, at the end of this third period, all these flying creatures talked about pono. Things are all pono. The fourth wa hana kapoya hono kua nanaka kulia kapoya ea kua neneke. In the fourth wall, we have all the creepers, the crawlers, the egg layers, these kind of creatures that especially as creepers and crawlers. Yeah, and they're in the fourth period, kawa eha. One of the interesting creatures that they describe here is the honu, yeah, or the Hawaiian green sea turtle, and the ea, the honu ea, which is the hawksbill turtle. And they appear and they describe their backs as being nanaka, like it's patched, like the shells. But what's interesting about these creatures, of course, if you think about it, is how do they appear? Yeah, well, they come out of the ocean, and what do? They come upon the land, right? The egg layers upon the land, and they return back to the ocean. So this question of these creatures appear. This is when you have the transition, right? Coming from the ocean and you coming upon the land. So now we start to have creatures upon the land, like these creepers and crawlers. E kukulu i ka hia la ala o ka ape au moe ka hiwa uli o ka hake kai I kai o kolo aku o kolo mai. Kolo aku, kolo mai. Kolo means to crawl in the fourth. And then again, po no. Well, it's a shift. In the fifth chapter, we have a higher level of creatures that appear. We have these pig-like creatures. Hanau kopo ahiva hiva I kiau kapo kano kano I no Hawaii. Moya poya po laluli hanau kapo. Now, what's interesting about these pig-like creatures is that they start to describe these creatures like not just the physical attributes that are different, but now they start to describe as if they have personalities. In other words, this is like a higher level being, right? It thinks, it acts. Yeah. You have the greedy pig, you have the lazy. In other words, they have personalities. And really what you see is that they're becoming higher and higher level thinking, capable creatures that eventually end with the human being. So the pig also starts to show this idea of domestication, is civilization, humanization, right? If you think about pigs, how do pigs relate to human beings? Well, they're in fact one of the earliest animals that we ever domesticated. Yeah, so when we left becoming like wild creatures in a sense, as we start to create homes and villages, the pig, in fact, was one of the first creatures that's domesticated, lived around the village. Yeah, it really wasn't a part of the family, but was close enough, but would be, a food item. Yeah. But they're very, very intelligent. right? I mean, anybody can compare one pig to a fish, for example, or a bird, and you can see a pig is a lot more intelligent. And again, po no in the sixth wall. He iole kouka, he iole kokai, he iole holoika wawa. We have these rat-like creatures that appear. And you got to think, well, it's a hierarchy, right? So the pig and then higher level creature is the rat. Now, why is that? Well, in Hawaiian myth making and stories, the rat many times is also seen as very, very intelligent. In fact, some of our stories, they kind of incorporate to become almost like family members, household members. And that's part of the story also, right? You think about pigs. Where do you find pigs? Outside running around, around the village, around the yard. Where do you find rats? Ah, rats, as we come up to the human story, are close to humans, very close, right? We know in our stories, and we actually know science, genetics today, that wherever human beings have gone in the Pacific, so has the rat. The rat has come along with us. In fact, even to this day, rats live with us, right? We know in our households, the rats live with us. They eat our food. They're as close as probably as close as it can be. Yeah. So again, this idea of the kind of connecting to humanity, civilization. And again, po no. And after the rat, now we have Wa Ehiku, the seventh chapter. He ilio kamakapo, he emai, he ilio I, he ilio a a. And you have the dog like creature, which is also shown as being a very highly intelligent. And of course, we can figure it out. The dogs, as they say, man's best friend. We're coming so much closer from the pig to the rat, now the dog, connecting to human beings. Yeah, and I know this is an ugly looking picture we have here, but this is the best picture I could find of a Polynesian so-called dog. Today we call poi dogs, who virtually have been bred out. As more and more other dogs have come to Hawaii, they eventually bred themselves out. But it also describes the dog in many different ways. But again, this idea is that they're coming closer and closer to humanity. Well, at the very end of Wa Ehiku, it's an interesting piece where they talk about a bat or pe'a. And again, if you look at a bat, you start to wonder, why is a bat being depicted? Well, we have to think again in poetry. What does the bat represent? Well, a bat is a creature that what hangs upside down. It's in the darkness, comes out to light. But the idea of being upside down is really the image that's being portrayed. And the image to portray is that get ready, world, get ready. A human will be born very soon. So how does a bat connect to the idea of a human being born very, very soon, right? Well, anybody that has a child or is going to have a child, you know that what's the sign that a birth is going to happen? Is the baby will turn downwards, that a head will head down. As people will say, the baby has dropped, meaning the head has moved itself down. It's getting ready in position. It's getting ready to be born. And that's the image that's in this poetry. So the last image of the bat signifies a baby will be born. In other words, here comes the first human. Yeah. Well, in the eighth wa, the first human is born, and her name, I repeat, her name is La'i. And when you read the David Malo story, and that's the Malo Hawaiian Antiquities, they talk about La'i and her story, where there is an interaction with Keli'i Vahilani, yeah, the Ali'i who rips open the heavens and he comes out. He looks down from the heavens above and sees this beautiful creature, La'i, at a place called Lalovaya. And it's in your reading, yeah, Lalovaya. And he descends and he says, wow, what a good looking creature. And he mates with her. And so the mating produces children, Ki'i, Kane, and then Kanaloa. These are the first three children of La'i and Keli Vahilani. Now, this is in the eighth chapter. So the thing to remember, the first human, her name is La'ila, and she appears, she is born Hanau in the eighth wall. Now, last thing I want to talk about just before I end here is that to kind of recognize that what La'i represents, it's not really saying like the first physical human being. They're not looking at the physical, like we don't have a tail. What they really talk about La'ila is that she's the first conscious person. She wakes, she's woke, as they would say today. She's awakened. When she is born, they no longer say wa oh no. Now the words are wow, wow, tis light. The light is on. To be awakened, to see, to be able to experience. Hence, we're out of po. Yeah, we become these beings that are conscious, in fact, very so-called godlike. And I'll talk more about this story in the next part.